Back in the 70s, therapist Bruce DiMarsico developed a pretty radical theory. He said, what if the only reason people are unhappy is that they think they need to be unhappy? What if, and hear me out here, we're actively but unconsciously choosing unhappiness over happiness? Clearly, this theory was challenging all conventional thinking. I mean, he was effectively suggesting that we could be happy always, right here, right now, and forever, if we simply were willing to look at and challenge some of our beliefs about when happiness is allowed. In today's video, I'll be sharing his method for challenging our unhappiness and generating happiness, and I'll be sharing and talking about some of the theoretical underpinnings that his method is built on. If you want to get straight into the practice, go to the second to last chapter of this video, get right to it. But if you'd like to understand the theory behind it, which I would recommend you doing, then stay with me. Bruce's fundamental claim is that all people throughout all time and across all cultures have been unhappy because they have felt that they should be unhappy in certain circumstances. So where somebody is unhappy, when somebody is unhappy, their unhappiness is a result of an assumption, a deeper belief that they need to be unhappy given the circumstances they are up against. In other words, happiness doesn't happen to you, so he says, but instead you go out and make yourself unhappy when you think that you should be unhappy. So on a deep and unconscious level, when you are unhappy, the only reason you're unhappy is because you think that you should be unhappy in that situation, which is pretty crazy. I mean, it's totally out there, right? Because so many of us are spending so much time and energy trying to be happy. So why in the world would we ever want to make ourselves unhappy? Bruce gives two simple reasons for why you might do something so crazy as choosing unhappiness over happiness. He says that number one, you have a belief that the situation you're in warrants unhappiness, that you should be unhappy, that anybody exposed to that same set of circumstances would also feel unhappy. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that you see your unhappiness as proof that you care. You see it as proof that you don't want things to be the way they are, and you see it as the fuel you need to be sure that you work to change the status quo into something better. Both reasons point to the same thing, namely that you are convinced that unhappiness is the right response given the circumstances that you are facing. In fact, if you weren't unhappy, you might feel like something was wrong with you, or you might feel like you didn't actually care about the situation when you do care about the situation. So in a twisted sort of way, you say you want to be happy, I say I want to be happy, but according to Bruce, our unconscious allegiance is actually to our unhappiness. And that hidden allegiance is a result of our thinking and our belief system. Therefore, if we're able to see and challenge our unconscious thinking and belief system, we can effectively think our way out of unhappiness and into happiness. Simply put, if we no longer felt any need to be unhappy or felt that we should be unhappy, then we wouldn't be unhappy. Pretty crazy stuff. But let's apply it to the real world. Let's take a practical example and see how this might play out. Take two traders who both lose money in the stock market. Yes, hand up, personal example, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I guess, depending on where we get with this method. Anyway, let's call them Jay, that's me, that's my avatar here, why not, and Jared. Now, everything is equal. They have the same money to their name. They lost the same amount of money in the stock market, yada, yada, yada. Jay loses his money. He immediately thinks, this is awful. This is terrible. This is horrible. This is a very unhappy event, and I am very unhappy about it. Jared, on the other hand, loses the same amount of money, but he has a completely different story that he tells himself. He thinks, this is part of my learning. This is a sign of me progressing, me getting closer to my goal of being a successful trader. I'm just paying my dues. Same situation, two completely different interpretations of it, and therefore two completely different emotional experiences. Jay believes he needs to be unhappy about losing his money. He thinks that his unhappiness is a sign that he doesn't like the situation, that he wants it to be better, and that he cares about having lost his money. Jared doesn't believe those things. So clearly unhappiness isn't in the event itself, but it's a product of the view that we take of the event, of the beliefs and the thinking that color our interpretation of the event. The emotions that Jay and Jared felt didn't happen to them, but instead, using the language of Bruce de Marsico, they made themselves feel precisely what they ended up feeling as a result of the beliefs, the thinking, and the stories that they projected onto the event. Clearly, this phenomenon extends beyond money. I mean, for instance, if I was unhappy with my mediocre job, then I might think that that means I'm okay with my mediocre job. If I am happy after my breakup, then I might think that that means that I didn't care about the relationship and that I don't care about the breakup. See the pattern? We use our unhappiness as proof that we care and as evidence that we want things to be different than what they are. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Trevor, are you saying that Jay should just be happy about the fact that he lost money? And that's not exactly it. Instead, what I'm proposing and what Bruce invites us to think about is whether or not Jay actually needs to be unhappy about the fact that he lost money, like his buddy Jared wasn't unhappy about it. Once Jay sees how his thinking and his beliefs and his views are fueling his unhappiness, then he can look at his beliefs, his thinking, and his views and question them. He can ask himself if they're true and if they're necessary. And this is where de Marsico's method comes into play. It's a simple but powerful way to call into question the thinking, the beliefs, and the views that drive our unhappiness. So let's see how this works. Think of something that you're unhappy about in your life. Could be anything, but make sure it's like a specific situation. Now, I'm going to guide you through a few questions to ask yourself about this. As you ask yourself these questions, I really want you to not just think about the answers, but to feel the answers in your body. I'm going to go through them quickly, but maybe you can pause the video after every question just to let it sort of sink in a little bit deeper. The first question, do I absolutely need to be unhappy about this situation? Let it land inside your body and see what comes up. Now, your immediate response might be, oh, whoa, actually, I don't need to. Or it might be, of course, I need to be unhappy about this situation. Anybody would be. How could I not be unhappy about it? And if that's the response, that's normal, stay with it. We're going into the second question, which is, what do I believe would happen if I wasn't unhappy about this situation? Or said another way, what do I think would happen if I were happy about this situation? Again, let it hit, let it land, slow down, pause the video, see what comes up. You might find yourself thinking, it would mean I don't care, it would mean I don't want it to change, it would mean I resign myself to the status quo, or something entirely different, but let the answers come up and feel them in your body. Now, if your answer told you that bad things would happen if you were happy about this situation, then I want you to ask yourself now, is that actually true? Is that 100% the case? If I'm happy about this thing that I don't like, is it true that it's going to get even worse? That even worse things will happen? That it will never resolve itself? That I'll never take the action to change it? Just check it out. Is it true? And now for the final question, which is the big one. Take a deep breath. Feel yourself in your body. What would it be like to allow myself to be perfectly happy even while this situation is what it is? Take a moment to sit with that. See if you can feel the difference between I don't like this situation, but I'll work with it, and I don't need to make myself unhappy about it, versus I don't like this situation, and therefore I need to be unhappy about it. See, we're always doing the second, but what if we did the first? What if we allowed ourselves happiness even while reality wasn't exactly what we wanted it to be? We might find that reality isn't actually all that bad, and it's our thinking that's sort of fueling our aggression towards reality that's generating our unhappiness. If we change our thinking, if we change our beliefs, we might be able to be perfectly content and happy in any given moment, regardless of how things are on the outside. I think that the crucial point is to recognize that being happy does not mean that you don't care, and it does not mean that you want things to stay the same. It simply means that you're no longer making your internal experience of happiness contingent on external events over which you have most of the time very limited control. Look, what do I think about this method, this theory? For myself, I've found it useful. It's helped me see that I have more say in the matter of my own feelings than I typically realize. And I've seen how it can be used for any negative emotional experience that I'm not particularly a fan of: anxiety, stress, sadness, anger. But like most things, this is simply a tool. And a tool is useful in some cases and not useful in all cases. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind. This shouldn't be taken on as some sort of ideology that you should always be happy and you can never be unhappy. I think that would be too extreme. I think Bruce probably would say that, and so I would disagree with that part. But I do think that there's a lot of value here if we use the tool effectively and if we use the tool in the right and appropriate circumstances. Personally, I do think that there are times when we will feel unhappy, and that's okay. It's part of the human experience. But if we become sort of too locked into our unhappiness, too tied to it, then this is a really good way to get us out of it. It's a really good way to help us expand our perspective and also maybe expand our emotional experience. The long and short of it is that if we'd like to be happier in any given moment of our lives, then this is a tool to help us get there. It might turn out that happiness is more available to us than we typically realize if we're simply willing to question some of our beliefs about when we're allowed to have it.